All in one can mean incredibly fresh tasting and very up to the minute. A case in point is Nathalie's slow roast beef with basil lemon vegetables. The flavor of the basil permeates both the vegetables and the meat, and it's served with couscous, the perfect last-minute addition. Top off this easy meal with a ginger-apricot flan, a delicious marriage of textures and flavors.
Hello, I'm Nathalie Dupree, and I'm here to show you another great busy day menu. First, we're going to do slow roast beef with basil lemon vegetables, and it'll serve 4 or really more. First thing that you want to do is to find yourself a nice beef roast, and I usually buy them on sale. Throw them in the freezer, wrap them well, throw them in the freezer, and pull them out when I need them. You can use chuck or a sirloin tip or round. This is the eye of round there. Any of the so-called tougher pieces of meat that long, slow cooking will make tender, that have an enormous amount of flavor. Now, the only thing is that when you've frozen meat, it will turn a little gray on you, and that's no big deal. There's nothing wrong with it. It's still good to eat. And you can see that if I slice it, on the inside is that lovely red meat that you've been taught to look for. It's just that we are not accustomed to seeing it turn color when it freezes, and we think, oh, is it all right? Well, it's all right. It's great. Now, right here, first thing that I want to do is to trim off any excess fat on this meat, and this really didn't have any. I just want to show you how easy it is. It's always easier to trim meat if you throw it into the freezer first so that it won't be flaccid, and you don't want to have it sticking under sitting under the lights. Here's some more of this fat, but there's very little on this piece, so I can just get rid of it, and I certainly wouldn't want to get rid of that good piece of meat. I might even leave it on. Now, frankly, I like the flavor of the fat, so I'm not as zealous a fat remover as other people are. The next thing that I want to do is to slice the vegetables that are going to go into it. Everything is going to go into the sack. And you know what you can do also is you can slice everything, put it into these boiling bags, leave them in there, and then put it out the next day and do it. Or you can slice your vegetables for 2 dishes. Since all of this cooks a long time in the oven, it's going to be quite different in texture than a stir fry. So for instance, you could slice zucchini for 2 meals, and squash for 2 meals, and eggplant for 2 meals, and use some of it for a stir fry one night while this is in the oven roasting a long, long time. Of course, it'll drive the cat and the dog crazy because they'll just smell it smelling so good. It's just the aroma is so wonderful when beef cooks for a long, long time. So I've sliced my zucchini. I sliced it on the diagonal there. I'm going to slice my onion, and I don't just slice one onion anymore. I slice several. I leave them in the refrigerator, although onions are really best not refrigerated. But I do, in other words, when you're storing an onion and you don't want to store it in the refrigerator. But if I slice some ahead, I leave them in the freezer or the refrigerator, and then pull them out and cook them when I need them. But certainly, if you're going to dirty up your board and dirty up your hands, you might as well slice several onions at one time. I'm afraid I didn't tell you what I was doing. I just pulled the skin off, kept the cut side away from me so I wouldn't cry, and then just slice right down. Do that. And move it out of your eyes so that you're not going to cry. I'm just going to get it over here out of my way so I won't cry. And then slice your eggplant. And you can use a Chinese eggplant if you'd like to. This is a nice big giant fresh garden eggplant. Going to slice this. And if I had time, I might salt it and put it in a strainer and let it dégorger, but I don't really have time. And then I had a nice big fat garlic clove here. I'm going to swack it, peel it, and chop it. Then grate the lemon peel. And I'll show you that if I have time. I just want to get into these roasting bags because I find them a real boon. Part of what I don't love doing is doing the dishes. course, you may, of course, just love doing the dishes, in which case you can just close your ears for this roasting bag segment. But these roasting bags are perfect for the busy cook because they really reduce the amount of cleanup that you have to do. They make it a snap. And they just, you put things in and they cook virtually unattended. You put the bag in a large roasting pan and dust the inside with flour, shaking it if necessary. And you just kind of want to coat that bag with that flour. And then you add your sliced zucchini. Well, I'm going to add the onion, the zucchini, the eggplant, and the squash. Try when you're in the kitchen doing something like slicing and chopping to prepare for 2 meals at one time and get one thing that cooks in a short period of time and one that in a long. That'll make your day a lot easier. There's my garlic going in there. I've got some salt and pepper and some lemon peel. Here's my salt. I think I've got it in there. And you just do all that to taste anyway. And you just toss the whole thing to mix. Now spread it out flat on your bag. Add some basil leaves. I've got some lovely fresh basil leaves, and I'm just going to scatter them on the inside. They make such a difference. Now, if you have some lemon pepper, which was the one thing that I really missed, I forgot to put those in when I was living in London, and I sort of got an affection for it. You can even rub the roast with lemon pepper. But if you're using salt and pepper, you can omit it. It's really up to you. Just anything you can do to do flavor. Sometimes I use the lemon pepper in place of the lemon peel. Place the roast on top of the vegetables, and then you secure the neck of the bag with one of the ties that's included in the package. Then you cut 6 to 8 1/2-inch slices in the top of the bag, and that's pretty important. And don't let the bag hang outside the pan. Because you don't want to do it. Pop it into low oven, about 325 degrees for 2.5 hours. And that gives you time to do all the things that you wanted to do, like fold the laundry, maybe do a little ironing in front of the television while you're watching your favorite murder mystery. Then remove it from the oven and let it sit 15 minutes. And here it is right here. Now, take the tag off or just cut it off. It's going to be a little easier for me than fooling with that tag right now. Hold it up so that you're not going to get that pan that you virtually don't have to wash dirty, and you can just cut a whole slit in the top of the bag and remove your roast. This is not the same size roast as the other one. Was a little smaller, so it didn't shrink as much as it appears that it did, although it will shrink some. And slice it thinly across the grain, and put your vegetables on the platter, and slice the meat. You can throw away that basil if you'd like to. Now, get yourself a fresh garnish, and here's your pretty arrangement of your meat on your platter, sliced across the grain, and mix your chopped basil, chopped garlic, your grated lemon peel, and sprinkle that over the vegetables just like we've done right there. Over the meat. Put a little vegetables on the side because it's pretty, and here's a platter of vegetables. There's a lot of juice left in the bag. Many times what I'll do is just bring it to the boil and add rice or couscous, and that adds a lot of flavor to it. Or you can make a sauce with it by thickening it with cornstarch or something. That dirties another pan, and sometimes it really matters. This whole thing can be thrown into the refrigerator and then reheated the next day if you would like to. To make your couscous or your rice, I also use instant hot water for my couscous because it's boiling. But anyway, you bring your cooking liquid to the boil, you add the couscous, take it off the heat and cover it, and let it sit about 5 minutes, and then you just fluff it with a fork, just like you do rice. You always fluff that with a fork rather than mash it with a spoon. But in the cooking liquid, it gets a lot of flavor and color when you get those good old beef juices. I think you're going to find this is very easy.
Nathalie will return after a word from her guest.
I'm Shirley Carrier, and I write and talk about food, and I wanted to tell you a few things about sweeteners today. We've got here molasses and powdered sugar, regular sugar, and some different syrups and brown sugar. Some interesting things about these different sweeteners. Honey, for instance. When you use honey in baking, you'll notice that those baked products stay moist longer. That's because honey has a lot of a sugar called fructose. It's a sugar from fruit in it. And that particular sugar draws water out of the atmosphere. So honey acts very much as a moisture holder in baked goods. Honey also imparts a nice, interesting flavor. And you can even use honey in many places that you traditionally think you only use sugar, like in a jelly. You can substitute up to half of the sugar you can substitute with honey for a really unusual jelly and different flavor. Now, brown sugar, I'm sure all of you have probably had some brown sugar storage problems. This is because brown sugar dries out. So one of the absolute best things you can do for your brown sugar is try to keep it tightly sealed so that it's not losing moisture. You know, some people recommend putting in a chunk of apple. This is so that the moisture in the apple will go into the, help keep it moist. But again, a tightly sealed container. I usually twist this bag really, really good after I've opened it and put a twisty, and then I put it in a good tight zip top bag and squeeze the air out and seal it too to keep that from losing moisture, a really good tight container. Back to honey. Some of the problems you have in storing honey, you may have picked up your honey jar and have noticed that it was crystal, you know, full of crystals and solid as a rock. What you can do in this case, it's just gotten too concentrated. Some of the liquid has evaporated off and the sugars in there have solidified. Now the thing to do is add just a drop or two of lemon juice or vinegar. That'll break those sugars up into different sugars and keep them from crystallizing, and a couple of tablespoons of warm water. And stir and heat this in your microwave, and it should hold for you. If you find that it recrystallizes, add a little bit more water. What's happened, you've lost some from evaporation there. Another problem in storage of these different syrups and maple syrup, any of the syrups, you can get mold on the surface. Now actually this is relatively harmless mold, and you can simply scoop it off the top and continue using it. The best way to avoid this mold is to keep it in the refrigerator, and certainly something that you treasure like a good maple syrup you would want to keep refrigerated to prevent that mold growth. But do not under any circumstances stir the mold in, because it will have a really musty, awful taste. Just scoop it off the top. It's a harmless mold, and it's all right then to use the rest. Regular sugar and powdered sugar are used primarily in baking, and when you need a really, really fine texture, you want to go with your powdered sugar, and your regular sugar is used frequently. And remember, sugar is not a total villain. I know we keep getting this from the health people, but one of the main things that sugar does is rot your teeth. It's not like fat, which clogs our arteries, so think a little kindlier towards sugar.
For nearly a century, Le Creuset's colorful French cookware has been a favorite in kitchens around the world. From its bold finishes and uncompromised quality to its easy-to-clean materials, the brand's range of iconic products are as easy to use as they are to love.
I'm going to show you a wonderful ginger-apricot flan. It's a little different than a regular flan in that it's not real smooth because it's got apricots pureed in it. It's best to make the flan a full day ahead of time because you want to make it chill properly. The tricky part is the caramel, as well as the temperature in which you cook it. And so I want to show you what can happen to you. Now, caramel And once you make a flan in a dish in your oven, you'll know for the rest of the time. But the first thing that you want to do is to dissolve a cup of sugar and 1 tablespoon of corn syrup in 1/3 cup of water in a heavy pan over low heat. Now, the water helps dissolve the sugar. Some people find it easier to just dissolve the sugar right over heat. I think I've got that, but it just sounds like, no, I haven't. But some people find it easier just to use plain sugar in a frying pan and caramelize it. I don't find that easier. I find it easier to add a little water to dissolve it. The corn syrup sort of stabilizes it. Now, what you want to do is to not let this boil until the sugar is dissolved. And there's no real reason. I mean, there is a chemical reason why if you did a lot of caramel, you might want not to stir it. But with this little bit, this is not going to hurt stirring it a little bit, and that'll speed the dissolving. But once it comes to, and I brush around the sides of the edges. Another way of doing that is to put a lid on top of it. But if you're like I am and you want to use a pan that pours, then the lid is not going to help. What the lid would do is cause it to sweat down the sides. Now, you don't want to stir it once it comes to the boil because that will change the texture of it. And also, you might introduce these sugar granules back into the liquid. And the whole reason for brushing it and the whole reason for making sure it's clear and dissolved before you boil it is because you don't want to reintroduce any sugar crystals into your dissolved liquid because that will cause it to clump up and crystallize. Now, once you dissolve it, you bring it to a boil and you boil it until the liquid turns a golden caramel color. And then you brush down the sides of your pan all along with cold water from time to time, as I said. Now, put into the pan your souffle dish. And let me tell you some of the mistakes that we made. Because we've made several mistakes in this, and I would like you to learn from us. You're supposed to warm a 1-quart oven-proof souffle dish in a 325-degree oven. Well, the first thing that we did was we decided it didn't matter that we have a 1.5-quart souffle dish. Well, it does matter because that gives you more fall space when you're turning out your caramel. Now, this is a very pretty color caramel. The way that you tell the color of a caramel is not by how dense it is there, but by how it is when you move it to the side, because this color right here is the real color of it as opposed to when it's dense. Next, you really should work with a pan of cold water right next to the stove because that will stop the cooking. This caramel, this souffle dish, is heated up so that, but not too hot, so that the caramel can move slowly around it and I can coat the sides of the caramel so that it'll be very pretty. If your pan is too hot, the caramel will slip right off. But once you do it a few times, you'll know exactly how you want your pan. And you can always let it cool up a little bit. Now, this is a beautiful colored caramel in this pan. If you want to, you can pour any extra caramel off right here. I don't know if I hope you can see that. Let me just show you that, see if you can see it. You can just drizzle it onto parchment paper or wax paper or aluminum foil. Now, the next thing, and a marble slab is perfect for it. Then when it's hardened, you can remove it and keep it in an airtight container or the freezer and use it as garnishes or chop it up or whatever. Now move on to your flan. Drain a cup of canned peaches and puree them. Peel a lemon into strips. And here's this. I'm just going to peel this right here for you. You just don't want any of the white. You can do that. Oop, so put that in your caramel. And be careful, a caramel burn is the worst kind of a burn you can have because what happens is that the caramel sticks to your hand and hardens. And these are canned apricots. I don't know what I said, but someone's writing apricots over and over again, so I must have said something else. It could be peaches too. Peel a lemon in strips. Then you add 2 1/3 cup of milk to your original caramel pan with the lemon peel. So let me get it back out of the sink. It's just so hot there. I was worried about it burning on the set. And add your milk, and what that's going to do is to clean your pan out. and heat it until small bubbles form around the side. And then mix 3 eggs, 5 egg yolks, and a cup of sugar. So here are my 3 eggs, 5 egg yolks, and I'm going to separate an egg for you here. Here we are. Crack, always use 3 bowls so that you can use your egg whites for some other purpose. Crack the white into 1 bowl. Do you see that little piece of shell? It wants to go home usually, and it goes right back into the shell. It's really terrific. Put that there, that egg white there, for another purpose. And a 1/2 cup of sugar. And just mix them all together. Don't get them to beat, because if you beat them too hard, then what you get is a foam. Now, we separated those eggs ahead of time, and what you can see is that some of the egg yolks got a little hard on the top. If you're going to have to do that, then you want to cover your egg yolks to separate them ahead of time. Cover them with a little water so they don't form a skin like ours did, and then pour off the skin. Now, you add the milk into the egg yolks, stirring constantly. You don't want it to be too hot. And as tried as I cleared off as best I could, I still didn't get myself right. And you want to stir that so that you're getting enough air in that you're not cooking those egg yolks. And then strain it into another bowl. There we go. That'll catch anything that overcooked on you, and it'll also catch those little dried hard bits of those egg yolks that I had. Now stir in 2½ teaspoons of vanilla, or your favorite. I let that milk get a little too hot, and so you can see I had some cooked egg, but because I had a gracious plenty of egg yolks, it's not going to really matter. Don't force that egg yolk through there. Now, add your vanilla, your apricot puree, and 1/4 cup of chopped candied ginger, and you can chop that in the food processor and get it as fine as you can. You're going to be able to taste and feel this. This flan is not, or flan, it's really, in Spanish, it's flan. A French flan, or an English flan, is a pie crust. It's pretty confusing. And then pour your custard into your souffle dish. Now, try not to get too much foam on there like I have there, because you don't want that foam doesn't always dissipate. And this is the first thing. We could have pureed those apricots a lot more to make a smoother custard. And you could even let the apricot sit in the milk for a while and then strain it out if you didn't want it in there at all. Now, get yourself your nice roasting pan and put a kitchen towel in the bottom of the roasting pan. This helps insulate the flan. Put the souffle dish in the flan, in the pan, the flan in the pan, and carefully pour enough boiling water into the pan to come halfway up the side of the souffle dish. Then put this whole thing in a 325-degree oven and cook it about 1 3/4 to 2 hours until the custard's set and a knife inserted in the center comes out clean. Don't let the water boil. That'll overcook the custard and cause pitting on the sides and little bubbles on the side. Then you remove the souffle dish from the oven and let it cool slightly. Cover it, refrigerate it at least 3 hours or up to 2 days. Now, I wanted to show you how to turn it out. First thing that you do, if you need to, is to run a knife around the edge of the dish. Don't be locked into how long you're going to cook a dish. Go back and look at it. But we have these ovens in the back, not the gorgeous ovens that we have here, but in our kitchen that 5 or 6 people are fighting for an oven, and sometimes someone turns it up. A lot of things happen to us. This is the way a flan will look when it's overcooked on the top. So I want you to see that it should have been watched a little more carefully. You can see that it's browning around the edges and it's brown there. Take a souffle dish, and I'm going to put it onto this pie dish because we're not going to use it. I'm going to show you a perfect one later. But let me just show you. Here you can see where it overcooked. You can see that we didn't get a pretty golden color in this caramel. It should have been darker, and you can see that it's separating a little bit. Now, can you see the edges here? Just starting to bubble up a little bit, and it's tougher on the sides. If you see it toughening, cover it with a little piece of wax paper. And then you can garnish this with the caramel shapes if you like. Here's another one. Let me just show you very quickly. Take this, flip it out, give it a shake if it doesn't want to come, because I forgot to go around the edges. There we go. And you can see that this stuck. And I'm not sure why it stuck, except that the caramel was not quite dark enough, and probably when we put that in, that's what happened. What you would do with this is to take this part out, and I don't think it cooked quite enough. That's really the flaw with this one. It didn't cook quite enough. Put this out, take some whipping cream, decorate the top of it, garnish it with some of this slivers. There we go. Put your piece of caramel on the top, decorate it with some whipped cream, and act like you meant for it to be that way.
All-in-one can mean incredibly fresh tasting and very up to the minute. A case in point is Nathalie's slow roast beef with basil lemon vegetables. The flavor of the basil permeates both the vegetables and the meat, and it's served with couscous, the perfect last-minute addition. Top off this easy meal with a ginger-apricot flan, a delicious marriage of textures and flavors.